I'm here with Eric Lascelles, Chief Economist at RBC. Eric just participated in Where in the World to Invest. So Eric, during the session, you said you predicted sluggish growth for the U.S., and you also said I'm the most optimist pessimist. Can you explain that view?
The most pessimistic optimist, yeah. The world ultimately tends to turn out right. The big risks usually don't ultimately happen. Clearly there's a lot of fear along the way. Clearly a lot of things are going wrong right now, but you can't help but be an optimist over the long term. And if you're not, you wind up losing a whole lot on the return side. And so again, I don't think I'd be an outright pessimist, but I'm hardly an ebullient optimist. And part of that does relate to the sluggish growth prognosis. I'm hardly alone in that perspective, but you'll look at the various challenges. Deleveraging is ongoing. Post-financial crisis growth tends to be slower. The U.S. isn't quite clicking on all cylinders, and there are big risks out there in the world, but growth is absolutely more likely than not. The experience of the last few years has been about 2% growth per year. I think that's where we're going to stay for the next few years. I wish it was 3, I wish it was more than that, but the reality is something like 2, and that might just be what the doctor ordered in terms of eventually finding our path back to something that feels a bit more normal.
Is the housing market still a concern in the U.S.?
The U.S. housing market looks to be bottoming. We've spent a lot of time investigating that subject, and it does look to be bottoming. As to whether it will mount a robust rebound, well, the jury is out. The affordability metrics are great. Home prices are down a lot. Mortgage rates are at unbelievable lows, and so I can say with a straight face that affordability is the best it's been in a generation, maybe longer. However, that does not guarantee an immediate bounce back because the mortgage credit is still quite hard to come by, and there's still probably 2 to 3 million too many homes out there relative to demand. So I think it's going to be a sluggish progress, perhaps in line with that economic assessment, but the bottom is probably in, and that's part of a broader trend, one of healing in the U.S. And so we're seeing a bit of healing in the labor market, a bit of healing in the credit market, a bit in the housing market. Don't lose sight of that with all the other glamorous things going on, because when these markets eventually heal, that's when we're back to normal.
Okay, great. And when we were talking about the euro crisis during the panel, Scott asked how does it affect the Canadian portfolio, and you actually said you don't think it really affects it in the long term. Can you expand on that?
Sure. In the near term, obviously, Canadian markets are being affected by Europe. When people feel pessimistic, we see Canada's stocks go down just like everyone else. We see Canadian yields quite low. So obviously, there is a near-term effect. In terms of the long run, though, if you subscribe to my view, which is I don't think the worst case happens in Europe, I expect that Eurozone to stick together. I don't think a big bank fails. I don't think a big country falls out. The consequences might be more mild. The trade linkages are quite limited. So the fact that the U.S. is in recession, that does not guarantee or even suggest recession for Canada or the U.S. The confidence linkages are sometimes strong. They're not right now. Confidence in Canada is good. Confidence in Europe is not. They simply seem to be going their own way. The financial linkage is the big risk. And so if you've got a more pessimistic take than me, you think the world ends poorly and a big bank in Europe fails, well, that would be very consequential for Canada, but I don't expect that. And so that linkage may not be quite as severe, and we've seen evidence of decoupling. So I walk away saying over the long haul, Canada actually looks quite a lot better than Europe. It may get dinged by Europe, but it should not be outright sideswiped.
Great. Thanks so much, Eric.
My absolute pleasure.